Kimayo iki koyan naming. Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Robinson, elders. Koyan naming. I would like to present Carol Bear. I anticipate Carol will be sharing her story of her mother and her story of her survivor as a survivor. Thank you, Carol, for joining us today and for sharing your strength with us. I would like to ask the registrar to issue the oath with Carol, please.
Ms. Bear, take the Bible in your right hand. Do you swear that the evidence you're about to give this hearing shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
I don't think, oh, never mind.
Now you're on.
Thank you, Kuyanami. So thank you again, Carol, for being here with us. And please share your story with us and with Commissioner Robinson.
Okay, first of all, I just want to say that I'm really nervous. I'm speaking on behalf of my deceased mother, someone who I never got the opportunity to meet. The only memento I have of her is this picture, which was sent to me by one of my cousins who I've yet to meet on the Ermineskin Masquachis. To me, it looks like she is in a hospital bed in a residential school, which is where she grew up. I want to, first of all, say thank you to all the volunteers that have offered their time and to everyone that's put their work into this process. I think it's really, this needs to happen. This open dialogue needs to happen because if we hope to move forward with change for this next generation coming up, this is the only way we're going to do it, through open and honest dialogue. So where to start? So I grew up in the system, per se, the child welfare system. I didn't have access to my file till I turned 18. So basically, my sister and I grew up in the same foster homes together. I don't really recall too much of my early childhood, and I think the Creator planned it that way. I don't know what we experienced, but I'm grateful that I don't recall anything of that earlier time. So when I turned 18, I was already homeless, living on the streets of Edmonton. So before I aged out, my social worker brought me to the office and he gave me my file and just left. I'm sorry. It was there that I found out that my mother had been murdered when I was 4. In the file, on the info of my natural mother, it said that she had led a very high-risk lifestyle. So to me, I took that to mean that she was a working girl on the street. And she was murdered when she was 36. So I would have been 4 at the time. So to hear that, when you're already in that environment, it just reinforced the fact that I didn't feel valuable about myself. And then to hear that your natural mother died, murdered when you're young, and just reinforce that belief that you're insignificant and that you have no value, which is so far from the truth. And I'm really, really disappointed. I just have to say that I don't know where are all the where's the representatives of the RCMP? Where are the members of the EPS? They should be sitting in these chairs listening to these families who have lost so much. And I don't understand why one representative from either of them could not be here to listen to our stories. And so for me, it was really important for me to be here to speak on my mother's behalf, because to me, she was a woman of value. It doesn't matter what kind of lifestyle she led, a high-risk lifestyle. She was still a beautiful woman. She was valued. She was loved. And I really feel that the intergenerational trauma brought on by the residential schools has really impacted our families in a negative way. How can you possibly learn to love and value yourself when you're told consistently, daily, that you're of no value and that we need to take the Indian out of you? How can you value and love yourself? And how can you expect to love and value your children? And so for me, it was really important that I speak on my mother's behalf, because if she were alive today, we would have a loving relationship, or she would love me the best way that she knows how, given the circumstances that she had to grow up in. And I'm so tired of hearing that our women are undervalued. And the fact of the matter is that we are beautiful, we're strong, and we're valued, and we are loved. And so for me, it was just so important for me to speak the words that my mother probably couldn't say, because she's no longer here. And my heart just goes out to the families that have no closure. And I really believe that the underlying issue is racism in this country. Our women are not valued. And that needs to change. And I think the only way that's going to change is if we stand up and we say no more. And I really don't know what else to say. I didn't really come prepared. I thought I was. But there's so many issues that our people are facing at this moment, and I just felt it was important I come out and speak on my mother's behalf, because she is no longer here. And that's all I can say right now at the moment.
Carol, can I ask you, do you know which residential school your mother attended?
I'm just assuming, because she was from Ermineskin, Massachusetts. So what I understand is there was Ermineskin Residential School. So I'm figuring that's where she went. And you got to understand, this has been a lifelong process. I mean, I grew up in the system. And at that time, like anytime I would ask my foster parents any information about my family, they would just say, you know, well, that's in the past. You should be grateful that you have a roof over your head, and the past needs to be left behind. So not even having that information, not having, not knowing where your roots are, it just makes you feel that you don't know where you belong. Do I belong in the native world? Do I belong in the non-native? So you grow up feeling confused. So I don't know exactly which residential school she went to, but I'm just assuming it was the Ermineskin one.
But you do know she went to residential
Yes, because here's what happened. I'm trying to get to that. So when I turned a certain age, I went back for upgrading. I was on the street for 7 years, homeless, encountered a lot of violence, and I'm just very thankful that Creator pulled me out of that lifestyle. So I began to become curious about my family. Where am I from? Who's my family? So at the age of 40, I managed to obtain my file through FOIA, the Freedom of Information and Privacy Act. I was able to obtain my mother's death certificate. And from that, I understood that she was born in Ermineskin. So I phoned Ermineskin. I managed to speak. I'm not going to mention names. I managed to speak with one of the band council members who said, oh, I know your mom. I went to school with her. So I'm assuming that was residential. And then I went back to school, and that's where I found out more about the residential school. This is going back a few years. One of my instructors at the time said that she had attended residential school. I didn't know anything about residential school. It's not mentioned in the curriculums, you know, which I think something, it needs to be implemented. It needs to be mandatory that children growing up find out about the residential school and find out its ugly history. So that's where I learned, that's like 15 years ago that I started on this journey of healing. And finding out where my roots are, where I came from. So, yeah, that's it in a nutshell.
Okay. And your mother's name was Mary
Oh, I'm
Emily.
sorry. I don't know if it's on the screen there, but this is the only memento I have of my mother. I think did I show this already?
You
Yeah.
did, but you can
I'm
show
sorry,
it
but this
again.
is all that I have of her.
Can you explain this?
Oh, this is a verse of a very strong faith. And it just says to be strong and courageous, which I'm trying to be today. I don't really know what else to say when it comes to residential school, except that I know that my mother did attend it. And chances are my grandparents and my great-grandparents and the parents for them attended them as well. So I don't see it having a positive effect at all. I have yet to hear one positive experience coming out of that whole hellish existence. I honestly can't imagine what it's like to be brutalized on a daily basis, made to feel that you're nothing. And it hurts my heart. And that's why I was able to forgive my mother. You know, she did the best that she could with what she had. And like I said earlier, I don't think it's impossible to love if you have not felt love yourself. So, yeah.
Do you have siblings, Carol?
I do. My sister and I were fortunate enough to be raised in the same foster homes. I've yet to meet my other families and siblings because we were all split apart.
Okay.
So I'm pretty certain that they all grew up in the system as well.
And your sister lives in...
My sister lives in Miramichi, that's in New Brunswick.
She moved there, or was she...
Well, she moved there after she's been there about 13, 14 years now.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you still have a relationship with your sister?
Yes, we do. We're very close. I think considering everything that we went through together, and I feel very fortunate that we grew up in the same foster homes together. I think Creator kept us together for a reason, and we're very close.
Okay.
So...
Do you want to share your story as a survivor?
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, so just before I turned 18, I was a ward assistant, as I said. And so at that time, I was already leading that high-risk lifestyle, as I put it. And so to read that just reinforced, I'm thinking, wow, my mother did the same thing that I'm doing. And it just really floored me. And I continued that lifestyle for 7 years, you know, being brutalized, raped, beaten, whatever you want to call it. It's a very dark time in my life. But there again, the Creator has healed me in many areas regarding that. And I'm just very thankful that I'm not one of the missing women. A lot of girls that I grew up with on the street, they're either dead due to drug use or they're missing. So the fact that I can sit here and share my story, to me, that just speaks of the Creator's protection. And I just can't imagine what it would be like to lose a family member not knowing what happened to them. I honestly can't imagine.
When did you start your healing journey?
Well, I became pregnant with my son, so that started me on the route to wanting to do better. I didn't want him growing up in the system as I did. I know the damage that it did cause me. But I was still dealing with my addictions. And so I struggled with IV drug use for a very long time. And like I said, a lot of the girls I knew on the street, they died from talc lung. Eventually your lungs just give out and you end up on oxygen. So without a transplant, you're gonna die because your lungs give out. So there again, I feel blessed that the Creator has kept me alive. I mean, I'm healthy otherwise. It's not something I really like to talk about, being on the street. I mean, because it's a very dark, lonely place. A lot of my sisters did make it. They're gone. for some reason, I'm still here, and I just feel very blessed for that. And it hurts my heart to know that a lot of our girls, a lot of our boys, a lot of our men, a lot of our women are out there on the streets. And to me, it doesn't matter whether you lead a high-risk right lifestyle, you still should be valued. And your life shouldn't be undermined. Your value is not in who you are. It's Creator didn't create us to be this. He created us to be beautiful people, and we are. We just got lost. And we need to find our way back. And I think by doing this, by sharing our stories, whatever that looks like, that's the only way we're going to get there. Yeah, so like I said, I just feel very blessed that I was able to come out of that lifestyle.
Are you okay with me asking about your experience as a foster child and your experience with your foster family? How did
Well, that's something I've yet to reconcile as well, because there was a lot of sexual abuse that took place in this one particular home. I've yet to confront the abuse, and I will. I just haven't come to that place yet where I can confront that person. As far as the abuse in the other homes, I don't recall. And like I said earlier, I think the Lord, the Creator, the Lord, has protected my memories.
you mentioned you're not connected to your native culture, your indigenous culture, and that's a result of growing up in a non-indigenous family. Did they help you to know
No, you have to understand that time it was the early 60s, and there was no such thing as being Native. I don't think it wasn't okay with society. I think we were at the bottom of the totem pole, so to speak, and I don't mean that out of disrespect.
Mm-hmm.
And the home that I grew up in from the time I was 6 till I turned 17 was a German foster home, so very strict. And like I mentioned, I don't know if I mentioned this to someone, but it was almost like the attitude, well, you just be grateful that you're here. Just be grateful that you're not in a horrible foster home. So it was like I almost had to leave my culture behind. When we first came there, we did speak Cree, I believe, because they spoke German, we spoke Cree, so it was really interesting, that communication, lack of, so not speaking your language or keeping it up, of course we lost it, and we picked up English and we picked up German, which is ironic to me, but, and then growing up in schools, going to non-native schools where you're made to feel that being a native is dirty. Like I got called all kinds of names because I went to mainly non-native schools. So I was picked on for being native, squaw, wagon burner, and that was tolerated. I mean, you're talking about the early 70s where racism and things like that were basically tolerated. And I went to school in the Edmonton public school system. Was never addressed. That's where I learned to fight. Because I didn't think it was okay to be called that. I knew it wasn't okay to be called that. So I guess one positive thing I can take out is I did grow up in a Christian foster home where I learned about the Creator, and many times in my dark times I would pray and just ask Him, just take me out of this, please, because it was just so hard. And He answered, so I'm grateful. I'm sorry.
Just apologize. When we talked a few weeks ago, you mentioned to me that you began to reclaim your Indigenous identity in your
Yeah.
40s, and you have a son. Can you share
Yeah.
that with your son?
So like I said, growing up in the 70s, being made to feel that you're less than because you're Native. It's only been in the past few years that I've actually began to reclaim my Native culture and being proud of who I am. I'm very proud of who I am now, and I've taught my son, you know what, because he doesn't look First Nations at all. So when people ask him, what are you? First Nations, and he's very proud to say that. And like I said earlier, I think it's going to be this upcoming generation that's going to reclaim our heritage. And I'm very proud to say now that I'm First Nations. I wasn't when I was younger because it was something that you just didn't do, I'm still learning more about my culture as I go, but I'm very proud of who I am as a First Nations woman. So, yeah.
That's wonderful.
Thank you.
So, unless you want to add anything and share anything else, I was wondering if maybe you can share with the commissioner if you have any recommendations.
I've got a list. First of all, like I said earlier, we need to make it mandatory for the Canadian-wide curriculum schools for the young people coming up in the schools to learn about the residential schools and what actually took place. We need to have more open dialogue when it comes to Native communities and the non-Native communities, because I really believe that racism, children aren't born to hate. You learn that. You learn that from your school, you learn that from your peers, or you learn it right in the home. So we need to start teaching our children that God doesn't see color, he doesn't see race, he doesn't see religion. He only sees us the way he created us to be equal. We're taught that one classes or one socioeconomic class is better than another, and that's not true. And we gotta start teaching our children that. And I think it should be mandatory that what happened in the residential schools needs to be taught to our children. Another thing, like I said earlier, is I'm just wondering where the EPS is and where all the RCMP are. Why are they not here? And there needs to be that open dialogue between our community and the policing forces across Canada, otherwise nothing's gonna change. And why is it that when a Native woman goes missing, the first thing that they say, oh, she must be out partying? Do they say that to every non-Native family that comes through the door? I don't think so. That needs to change. The fact that we have another residential school system starting with child welfare. How many children do we have in care right now? Our children are maybe not being taken away and put in schools, but they're being put in foster homes. Is that not the same? I mean, we just got our children back, and now they're being taken away again to be raised by, and I'm sorry to say, non-Native families. They need to be placed with Native families, Native foster homes. Once again, we're being stripped away of our culture, our language, our family, our roots. They're doing it to us all over again, but in a different way. And that needs to change. And I think there needs to be more community dialogues like this. It shouldn't have to take almost 2,000 missing women for this to happen. That's not acceptable. And why is it that when a non-Native woman goes missing, there's media coverage? When one Native family their children or families go missing, it takes up to a week before the police take action. Otherwise, it's just, oh, she was a woman at risk, so who cares? That's not right. That needs to change. There's a whole lot in this country that needs to change, but I think we got to start taking personal responsibility as well. And I don't want to offend anyone, but I think that we have to start taking personal responsibility. I need to take personal responsibility for my actions and from the way I treat people, and vice versa. We got to start treating each other better. And we got to start loving ourselves and being proud of who we are, because we come from a very strong, strong culture. And I also think that issues on the reserve need to be addressed. Sexual, physical, emotional, all that is taking place on our reserves as well. That's not being talked about. That needs to be addressed. As for me, I take responsibility for all the actions I've done in my life. I've chosen to forgive the people that have hurt me and my family. I chose to forgive the person that murdered my mother. But it's an individual process, it's an individual journey, and sometimes that takes years. So we got to start taking personal responsibility as well. Other than that, I don't really have too much more to say.
Thank you, Carol.
Yeah.
Thank you for your strength.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Robinson, this concludes Carol's story, unless you have some questions to ask.
I want to first thank you
Thank you
for sharing with us about your mother, Mary Emily, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
Mary Amelia, sorry.
Amelia?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And for bringing the photo of her and sharing with us your one memento. I've heard your recommendations and our need to take collective responsibility as well as personal, I think is a really powerful message, and thank you for that. We all play a role in this and making our communities safer. I do have a question. You talked about, your sisters in the street and so many of them, and you speak for them. You are here giving them voice too, and I want to thank you for that. I'd like you to know what you think about what we as a society can do better to help women and girls and boys who are street involved make that move away from that lifestyle. Do you have some thoughts on what can be done there?
There again, quit taking our children away. If a family is struggling with addictions or whatever issues, help that family. Because I bet you it costs less to actually put supports in the home or have that person work one-on-one with a resource worker than it is to actually put that child into the system. Help that family. Don't just take that child away. If that child is in danger, of course. But before it gets to that point, before it reaches that point where you have to physically remove that child, there has to be another way. Work with the mom, work with the father, get them the help that they need before it even gets to that point. Because we're talking about intergenerational trauma. What do you expect when a parent has grown up seeing alcohol in the home, or they've grown up seeing physical abuse? What else is that child going to learn? So you need to help that family before it gets to that point. And quit taking our children away. You have to start helping these families before it gets to that crisis point. Help the children that are struggling in school. Because the government is making money off our children. Putting them in foster care is not the answer. That's just perpetuating it. In other words, those children are going to grow up unloved. They're going to feel that they lack the parenting skills, and they're going to do exactly what they learned. Because I did it myself to my son. So help those families, help those children. That's what I would say.
Thank you. I don't have any other questions. I just want to thank you and commend you and raise my hands for your courage for coming and sharing with me and deciding to do it publicly this way.
Thank you.
It's a very important dialogue, and I thank you. Thank you so
You're
much.
welcome.
Koyanami, thank you. Thank you very much, Carol. Thank you, Commissioner Robinson, at the time.
Thank you.
For those of you who may not have been in the room this morning, what we do as a commission is the matriarchs of the Haida Gwaii, when we were first in Smithers, had a call out to the gathering, the harvesting of eagle feathers to provide to the families. And they've continued that process for us as we do our hearings across Canada. So each of the family members or people who tell their truth are given gifts of thanks from us for giving their gift of truth. We recognize and thank them for that, both with a feather, and we also provide a seed packet. You may see in the banners, it's called Gifts of Reciprocity. So we have different types of seeds that are used across the country that we ask the families to plant and to take pictures, because we'd like to symbol a new life and new growth. So we will continue to keep track of these plants if they are planted. And we also, of course, offer tobacco in thanks for the truths. So that's what the commissioner was talking to the, I don't even know her name. Karen, sorry. Carol, sorry.
So we'll adjourn in this room until 3:15. There is another public hearing going on in the second hearing room if people wish to tune in or people in the audience wish to go into the room. It's starting now, I believe. Okay. So we'll adjourn here until 3:15. Nakomik.